So this upcoming weekend is going to be another very, very exciting weekend in the world of combat sports. And of course, this weekend, I almost shouldn't have to say it, this upcoming weekend, finally, we are going to get one of the biggest grudge matches in the history of combat sports, let alone in the sport of mixed martial arts. Jorge Masvidal versus Colby Covington. This is going to be an absolute war. No matter which of these two guys wins, it's going to be an absolute war. Because this might actually be one of the truest grudge matches that we have ever seen in any combat sport of any kind. You're looking at two guys in this fight who both of them, in their heart, believe that they have a tremendous grudge against the other guy, and both of them, in the deepest recesses of their heart, every little fiber of their being, they both believe that they're right. They both believe that they've been wronged by the other guy, and this is their opportunity to finally settle it. And really, that's something that everybody should really have just anticipated about this. And I think in a lot of ways, that's what makes this fight so interesting. I mean, this is kind of a lesson taught from pro wrestling. This was something that was taught to Mick Foley by Jerry Jarrett, who was an old school wrestling promoter out of the South. But what he basically said was that a heel is only interesting. I mean, a villain is only interesting so long as they can offer you some kind of justification that shows that they honestly do believe that they're right. And when you look at Colby Covington and Jorge Masvidal, you're looking at two guys who, I mean, while definitely one of them is a lot more popular than the other, these are both guys who really don't seem to mind, playing up that role of the heel. Now, this is a fight that we were actually originally teased with 2 years ago. It was right after Colby Covington came up with that big TKO victory over Tyrone Woodley, the one that basically wound up ending Woodley's career and relegating him to try to box Jake Paul for the rest of his days. And right off the bat, Colby Covington came out and he called out Jorge Masvidal. Basically said that he wanted Street Judas to get in the cage with him. And so based on that, right away, a lot of people expected this fight to happen within 6 months of that, and that the road to Kamaru Usman and the welterweight championship of the world for either of these fighters was going to lead through the other one. And as it turns out, what actually happened was very different. The road for these two fighters to fight each other actually wound up leading through Kamaru Usman and that welterweight championship. So I'm not going to recount the history that led Jorge Masvidal and Colby Covington into this grudge match. There's all kinds of other places where you can do that. As a matter of fact, there are places where you can have that recounted for you, better than I would be able to. I honestly recommend the Mixed Molly Whoppery is a really, really outstanding MMA channel on YouTube, and I recommend his work on that. But I am going to tell you what's actually at stake in this fight. And the interesting thing is that a lot of people looking into this fight, they just assume that what's at stake is, the ability to go in and get that big win over their rival, and to have that live, in immortality for the remainder of the history of this sport. But I don't really see it that way. When you listen to these guys talk about this fight, in the lead up to it, especially during the interviews that they've done over the past 2 weeks, it seems like a little bit like there's something very different at stake. It's not what's at stake for these two guys isn't really, the right to, the possession of that victory that they'll remember for the rest of their career, and that the sport of MMA will remember for at least the rest of their career. The way that both of these guys are talking, it seems like what's really at stake in this fight is the right to forget about the other guy entirely. Because that's what both of these guys are saying. They're saying that it's like, I'm going to go in there, I'm going to knock him out, and then I'm just going to move on, and I'm going to forget that this ever happened. I'm going to go into that octagon, I'm going to do this thing, and then I'm going to forget that this other guy ever existed. I'm going to forget about all of this altogether. And it's a really interesting concept in a lot of ways, but the question that we have to ask ourselves is it altogether likely that a grudge as intense as this one, that either guy is just going to forget about this and walk away? Because I really don't think that's I don't anticipate that being the case. Because when a grudge is this intense and a fight is this personal, at the very least, the loser often finds a way to make themselves pretty unforgettable. Believe me, believe me, I can speak to that personally. I can speak from personal experience just how insistent a loser often can be. How insistent on sticking around they can be. Colby Covington in particular, if he manages to lose this fight, I could see him finding it in himself to be quite the pest about it for quite a long time afterward. I mean, if you need any proof about that, just look at everything that he had to say after that first fight that he had with Kamaru Usman. He was still out there, trying to tell Kamaru Usman to his face that he had quote unquote broken Usman's spirit, pretty much right up until the point when they had their second fight and Covington lost to him again. So the right to just forget about the other guy, that's one thing. It doesn't really necessarily bring with it an obligation on the loser's part to be forgotten about. So for as much as both of these guys are saying that this fight is going to settle everything between them once and for all, I think that we as fans should be ready to anticipate that within a couple of years, we could find ourselves right back here in this same situation.